6 quotes per day, 108 times. So 600 to 1,000 quotations a day I was reciting on nothing but positive words. And I was monitoring my state of being in 7 parameters of life: spiritual, mental, career, financial, family, social, and physical, 4 times a day, and monitoring this for 2 years to find out if nothing but positive feeding of my mind is going to create any difference on the hedonic cycle. And it meant nothing. We want to be right instead of want to learn how to love and appreciate and communicate. And that makes a difference. I mean, explosions and bombing and rapes, and you name it. There's nothing that can happen in your life that you can't turn into an opportunity and use to contribute to this world.
Don't care what you think, I'ma just do me, and I wanna hear you sing. I got superpowers, superpowers, I got superpowers, superpowers, I got superpowers, superpowers, working 7 days a week and 24 hours.
Dr. John Demartini, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero.
Thank you. Great opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Well, you've made a special trip in the middle of a typhoon in the South China Sea at time of recording. If the ship was to go down and no further record of you was made, what would you like your last words on Earth to be?
My last words, thank you. I've had an amazing life. It's been inspiring. And you won't have to hear my jokes now, so you'll be able to be free and clear.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of people disappointed that they're not going to hear John Demartini's jokes. Probably less people concerned about hearing Laban Dishpan's jokes.
I was just in Japan doing a tour in Japan, and the lovely lady said, I really enjoyed all of your, what you had to share, but your jokes, that wasn't your strong suit.
Have you always liked to include an element of humor in the work that you've done, John?
I can't say I consciously try to bring humor to it. It just, sometimes the things that I get to talk about and the events that I get to experience, some of them are just humorous. And so I bring it in because it's applicable to human life, human beings, and it's funny. Some of the things we do as human beings are pretty funny. Our normal character.
I would agree with that for sure. And it was interesting in researching and preparing to talk to you, John, because there's so many directions, there's so many things you've done, so much impact you've had on the world, that it's easy to go back 20, 30 years and rehash things that might have evolved. So I was really curious to know, what's front of mind for you now that you're working on that's maybe something that people haven't had exposure to when it comes to John Demartini?
Well, I'm constantly researching, and I'm writing 2 books right now. One is on balance the mind, heal the body, and it's the relationship between perceptions and physiology, endocrinology, neurology, and symptomatology. And because I've been fascinated by that for 50 years. And another one is on the evolution of morality in terms of neurology. How did morality occur in society as a survival strategy, and what are the stages of those moral developments according to brain developments, and then how does it spill over into all the cognitive and non-cognitive, and absolutism and relativism and the different aspects of morality, because we're making decisions, and I always talk about values, and we're evaluating things, and we're indoctrinated by certain ideals. And so this has an influence on society. And so I thought I'd put together a text on that. So I'm working on about an 800-page textbook on just that, just the evolution and history, prehistory of how they carry over from animals. Literally, these are byproducts of the evolvement process and the brain development. And so that's one of the things I'm working on right now. And we recently were premiering and about to launch a new movie, and there's actually 3 of them coming out. So I've just been busier than a bee, just researching, writing, traveling, and teaching, doing what I love doing.
Well, feel free to drop those names of the documentaries, by the way, if you know.
Well, the main documentary that's about to come out is the Breakthrough movie. They've done a movie on my seminar that I've done all these years, the breakthrough experience. They put a movie together on that and the methodology that I built. So that's won, I think, 21 awards already.
Congratulations.
In film festivals. So it's been really good. We're doing another premiere. I think we're coming up in Melbourne in October, and we're doing one in Amsterdam pretty soon in September. And we've done one in London, and we've done one in Tokyo, I think. So it's starting to surface, but we haven't launched the movie yet. We're just doing premieres, but we've been filling up the theaters with it. So I'm pleased with that. And so I'm just working away. The other couple of movies one is The Science of Getting Rich, and the other one is The Journey of Riches. And it's about how many people struggle to overcome their financial challenges and to be able to become masters of money instead of slaves to money. So you're working because you love to, not because you have to. So I'm trying to share ideas on how to help people navigate through their own immediate gratification so they can defer their gratification and actually have money work for them finally.
Well, man, there's so many directions I could go with that. One of the things that struck me in one of your most popular book, I think, would probably be The Breakthrough Experience.
That's the one that's been out for quite a while, but probably sold the most. It's in the most languages. All of my books are in 40 languages, but that one I think is in most of them. So I've been blessed to have that book out for a while. Yeah, I've been teaching a course called The Breakthrough Experience for going on 35 years now.
Well, there was two parts of it that really slapped me across the face. One of them was around the amount of people that you love increases your self-worth. Because the finance thing's been, I'm a relatively new entrepreneur, I suppose you'd call it, 5 years. And it seems like that's still in that early phase. Hell, have gone through the last 4.5 years, very interesting, fled the lockdowns of Melbourne, ended up in Mexico and India and America and Colombia and, 20 miscarriages in a row and running out of money in the middle of India, and just, real character building stuff. Just recently, John, I've just started meditating again, and my God, I had so many people tell me to do it, but no one ever actually sat me down and explained why. And things have just opened up just in the last 2.5 weeks. And so I'm reading that part of the book, and it's talking about the more people you love, the higher your self-worth. And I'm thinking, am I missing something with what I've been doing? How do you gauge that? Hey, g'day there, and pardon the interruption. It's Laban Ditchburn here, affectionately known as the world's best courage coach. And if I'm someone that you've been listening to or watching on this podcast that you resonate with in some way, and you see me as being a possible solution to some of your biggest challenges, I would love to make available to you today a complimentary transformational coaching session. And I have limited space available. If this is something that resonates with you, go into the show notes or in the YouTube or the Rumble, find the scheduling link, book the time on your calendar, and let's get this started. Now, back to the show.
Well, there was an old statement in the New Testament that was, I'm not using that because that's the best reference necessarily. I just happen to use that as a quote. But judge what you judge in others, beware, you're judging yourself because you do the same thing. And I found that to be quite true over the last 40 years of doing self-reflective work. So when we are judging others, the reason why we resent others is because they're reminding us of something we feel ashamed about and are too proud to admit it, and covering it up with pride and looking down on them and avoiding them because they're reminding us of what makes us not appreciate ourselves. And so when we get to love them and own where we do that and find the benefits of what they've done and the benefits of what we've done, and we clear the shame and don't have to hide with the pride, all of a sudden we realize that now we're more stable. They're somebody appreciative, and they've been our teacher the whole time instead of our enemy. And so there's great wisdom in that. That also works on people we admire. We're sometimes too humble to admit what we see in others inside us, but the truth is we have that too. Mm-hmm. Nothing's missing in us. Fulfillment is the realization that nothing's missing. As long as there's something missing, we don't have fulfillment. We have emptiness. And judgment, reveals emptiness, and love opens up the fulfillment level. And then we end up feeling more empowered and capable of doing what we really love to do in life. So I'm a firm believer in my whole methodology is designed to help people appreciate and love other people and themselves. Why not?
Well, I'm going to take the time to do the exercise properly. And I was going to ask you, has there ever been an exception to what you just said, ever once? Because I'm convinced that some people I meet are just dicks. And do you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
is that what I'm saying of myself?
yeah, I did an exercise 40 years ago because I noticed that whenever I would sometimes point my finger at people and I was going, ooh, that's me. And I would notice that in myself. And I didn't want to admit it initially. So instead of waiting for people to push my buttons, I decided to go to the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, I'm a neurotic researcher, so someone like me would be the only one that does this. No one else would probably waste their time on this. But I went to the dictionary and I literally read page by page this massive dictionary. And anytime I came across a personality trait that was the human behavior, I underlined it. And then out in the margin, this tiny margin, I wrote down the initials, kind of an abbreviation of the name of the individual that I thought demonstrated that trait to the fullest, the most extreme, and put their name out there. And then I looked in myself and I said, all right, John, go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait, action, inaction, or behavior that you're perceiving in them. And where was it? When was it? Who'd you demonstrate it to? And who perceived you that way? And then go to another moment. Where, when, who? Where, when, who? And I kept going until I can identify that whatever I saw in them, I had in me to the same degree. And I went through 4,628 traits over quite a bit of time. And I found out I had every one of them. I was nice and mean and kind and cruel and considerate and inconsiderate and peaceful and wrathful and honest and dishonest. And I had every friggin' trait that I demonstrated that I saw. But now, instead of realizing that any trait you deny is a trait people push your button with, either they hook you with pleasure or hook you with pain, and you seek or avoid, admire or despise them, all of a sudden I noticed that my reactions to people were more centered, more poised, and I reflected and saw who am I to judge them. And I noticed that my dialogue with other people changed, and the behavior dynamics between myself and them changed. And I realized that any trait that I'm too proud or too humble to admit that I have is my disowned part. And that's my emptiness, and that's my unfulfillment, because they're there in my life to bring out to my awareness. I also noticed that my judgment of them calmed. So instead of labeling them, what an evil SOB, or what an amazing person, I just calmed and I saw both sides of people. And when I saw both sides of people, and I actually went back on that exercise, and if I thought it was a positive trait, I found the downsides. And if it was a negative trait, I found the upsides. The idea of a light and shadow is purely a moral hypocrisy. All traits are needed in people. You know, I'm not a nice person. I'm not a mean person. Those are personas. I'm a human being with a set of values, and you support my values. I'm nice as a pussycat. But you challenge my values, I'm mean as a tiger. When I go to the airport and they say, well, Dr. Demartini, we have an upgrade for you, and you have the first class lounge and everything else, I'm nice as a pussycat. If they say, well, we don't find your ticket anywhere, and you'll have to go next week, and I've got 1,000 people waiting for me somewhere, I'm the dick. I'm the asshole. I'm not a nice person. I try. I start out that way, but I quickly go and escalate to a point of doing whatever it takes. And I learned that from Eddie Murphy, I think, in 48 Hours, how to act like when I go to the Wilshire Hotel. But I basically will play out whatever side's needed to get what I'm going for. And so I'm not a nice person or a mean person. I'm a human being with a set of values, and I play out both sides depending on the situation. And I need both sides in order to function. So I quit trying to get rid of my half of myself to love myself. I tried to honor both sides of myself. And most people are afraid to do that. They've been indoctrinated by moral hypocrisies, and they're trying to get rid of half of their existence and trying to be only one side. Then the Buddha said the desire for that which is unobtainable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is the source of human suffering. So I own the traits. I see both of them inside me, and I'm a human being with both sides. That's the truth about me. And I don't need to hide that or put on a facade or be imposter about that. I can just be me that way. If there's a bumping, you saw the thing bumping all of a sudden, we just hit a big wave.
Yeah, for our audio-only listeners, John's in the middle of the South China Sea being buffeted by a Category 19 typhoon. And I've been told a billion times never to exaggerate, but that's the truth.
No, it's a Category 4.
It's pretty big. It's pretty big.
7-hour winds.
Thank you for converting. Most of our audience is American. Now I have to get out their calculators. The context of this recent meditation, John, I had a conversation with my father. We hadn't spoken on the phone for 2 years. We'd had messages back and forth, but it had been very fractured. And the relationship with my father and I had been very tight for a very long time. You know, I'm 8 years sober in August, longer for drugs, longer for gambling. And as I kind of improved my life, the fracture developed. And I suspected that I was reflecting things in my father that he wished maybe he had done with his life. And for some reason, he kind of got, I don't know, it seemed like he got jealous of me. And after I meditated on the second day, after a very vivid dream about trying to chase my father around the house, trying to kill him in this dream, I was like, stuff it. I'm wasting all this emotional bandwidth. And I called him and we had this conversation. And the first question was, what kind of relationship with me, if at all, do you want? Because I wanted to get some kind of closure because I was wasting a lot of bandwidth. And, you know, I don't want to hate on my dad here, John, at all. Very grateful for all the wonderful attributes and the not so great things that I learned from him. But I can't be around him simply because A, he's probably the most negative person I've ever met, and I've met a lot of negative people, and he refuses to take ownership for anything. So my question is like, I want to make sure that I'm making the right decision for me without obviously missing something that's going to deplete from my life force. Does that make sense?
Yep. Well, what I usually tell people is to make a list of everything that I'm judging in that person that's making me want to withdraw or want to be attracted to, and find out what those traits are. And then go and reflect and go find out where those traits are inside yourself, like I was saying. And in the process of doing that, once you own the traits, you find out that they're a teacher. They remind you. We only resist something that reminds us of something we're not loving in ourselves. That's the bottom line. So what we do is we go in there and find those traits. And then all of a sudden we find out that individual is pretty cool. Because now I'm not reacting to them because it was my button, not theirs. And sometimes we want to fix other people and point our finger at them, but it's not. Now you can avoid them, but what you're doing is you're trying to avoid people that remind you of something that's inside you that's the issue. So I just stick to going and owning the traits and finding out how they serve and ask the question, how is being around them a benefit? If I don't see the benefit, there's a withdrawal, there's a reaction, there's an avoidance response. And then they run my life. Anything that we try to run towards or run away from runs our life. Because it's an impulse and instinct. It's an amygdala response instead of an executive function. So I tell people if they take the time to go and do that, then that individual, if they're close or far, it doesn't matter. You can love them no matter what. That's more freeing. And your father's going to, someday he's going to pass on and you're going to realize that whatever the judgments are, or whatever the reactions are, was it worth it? You still love your dad. It's not going to go away.
Yeah, I mean, none of that's changed. Just spending, like, it's impossible. And I'm trying to think. As I was reading the book, I was thinking, like, I don't use negative self-talk. Like, I've been very conscious about my language, and one example.
But if you infatuate with positive language, you're going to avoid negative language, and the infatuation of, it's like a magnet. If you infatuate with the positive pole of the magnet, the negative pole comes with it, and you're trying to avoid it. And the more you try to avoid it, the more it comes to you. As Jung said, anything you try to run away from, you keep running into. And that's because you're wanting only one side instead of embracing the two sides of life. And if you look carefully, you've got people that are supportive of you and people that challenge, people that are positive and people that are negative. And you need both to grow.
Yeah.
If you get nothing but support, you don't grow. You stay juvenilely dependent. You get challenged, you get precociously independent. That's what makes the entrepreneur. And what makes the addict is the support. That makes you dependent. The dependency is basically on the support, seeking support without challenge. So I go find out how it served, And then the process of doing that, it liberates.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know. Yeah.
Make a list of everything that you dislike about it, by his behaviors, negative thinking or whatever, and find out where you do it until it's equal. Because you may not be aware where you're doing it. You may be negating negative people. That may be the negation. That may be the form of it. Then go find out how it serves you and how important it is to have it, because you need both in life. You know, Elon Musk going to Mars is never going to make it on positive thinking. He needs to have an engineering going, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, and then they mitigate the risk, and then they figure out what to do to solve it and create strategic plans and then set real objectives, not fantasies. So you need both of those in life. And very commonly, people that are the real negative displayers marry the positive ones, and they play in a battle going, you know, husband and wife are basically the optimist and the pessimist, and they're together make up love. That's what love is, the pairs of opposites.
Yeah, I loved reading in your book some of the anecdotes you're talking about, husbands or partners of people that attended your conferences that basically blamed you for all of their own life's problems. and then they collapse and admit that it's all them, and there's tears and all this stuff flying through.
Well, you know, Epictetus said, first in your journey of personal development, you blame others and you become a victim of history. Then you go and blame yourself as you start the journey. And then you finally realize there was nothing there to blame in the first place. You had a delusion and fantasy about how life's supposed to be. Life wasn't matching your fantasy, and it's there to crack your fantasy and break your addictions to delusions, to get grounded. And then once you do, you realize that that thing that you thought you needed to blame in yourself or others means it was actually to your advantage. And then you realize there's nothing there to blame, and you finally grow up.
Hell, what age did you hit that point, John, do you reckon? Were you like,
it took me to 30 at least to get that.
Yeah.
I did a research project. Now, if I would have been smart, I could have gone right to the psychology text and learned about it. There's the thing called hedonic adaptation, hedonic treadmill, and hedonic paradox. And it basically shows that anytime you go above and get into the pleasure, there's a homeostatic mechanism to bring you down. And anytime you go below it, there's a homeostatic mechanism to bring you back. And so you're basically oscillating with a psychothymic cycle. And I did this research project trying to be, you know, Mr. Positive all the time. And I documented the most positive statements, the most positive words that a human being could do. And I recited 6 quotes per day, 108 times. So 600 to 1,000 quotations a day I was reciting on nothing but positive words. And I was monitoring my state of being in 7 parameters of life: spiritual, mental, career, financial, family, social, and physical, 4 times a day, and monitoring this for 2 years to find out if nothing but positive feeding of my mind is going to create any difference on the hedonic cycle. And it meant nothing. I still had ups and downs, and no matter how much positive did. Then I finally realized that we're homeostatic. That's what we're designed to be, not one side. And so people are the amygdala wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure, and that's our survival strategy. But that's not our thrival strategy. To thrive is to embrace both sides of life. You don't go anywhere unless you embrace both sides. Donald, for instance, people think he's crazy and everything else. But one thing he definitely has is the ability to handle pain and pleasure. Most people don't have that ability, and that's something that we can all benefit by, is having a little bit of resilience and adaptability to a changing world, because otherwise we're going to run and look for a secluded little safety pin.
I heard recently that he listened to The Strangest Secret 5,000 times or 500 times. Have you heard anything along the lines of that? We're talking about Donald Trump, by the way, folks.
I don't know that. I have had the opportunity to meet him and spend time with him. I lived in the same building as him, so I know his family. I know he reads extensively. Guy's a very vast reader. He used to read 4 hours a day. I don't know if he's done that particular study or that particular action, but I know that he does a lot of reading. He's read all my books. I read all his books. So, but, what we see on television is not the full Donald. That's one thing I'm certain about.
Yes.
What's shown on there is not not the whole picture. We just see what we're told to think. It's propaganda we see.
Yeah, it's funny, John. I recently watched Dr. Stephen Greer. I think The Lost Century, I think it was called. I don't know if you've seen his work. The ufologist guy.
I haven't seen it, no.
Dr. Stephen Greer. And basically, long story short, for about the last 100 years, the technology for zero-point gravity technology has been in existence. It's been suppressed, free energy, all of this stuff. And basically, the people that are, they call it like deeper than black ops thing. So that even the president of the United States and the senior cabinet have no idea that these projects are taking place. They're run by the military industrial complex and like big corporations. Because when free technology comes out, it wipes out a $100 trillion energy business. And the technology to heal and clean the oceans and do all the stuff. And so when I watch that, and I take everything at face value, I want to experience things for myself. But my whole philosophy is I just want to know the truth so I can make an informed decision. But if that is true, then what we're looking at are distractions and puppetry in many cases. Would you agree? Like, so it's given me a freedom.
Well, I was chatting here with somebody on the ship who's an influential gentleman, and he is involved in ecological issues worldwide. And he's in a high position, and he basically was saying that he's trying to get governments to participate in ecological, global warming issues and clean environments and things. And I told him, I said, your idealism isn't going to work. And he says, well, it's not. That's frustrating as hell. And I said, because you're not talking in their values. The economics runs things, whether we like it or not, it runs things. Mm-hmm. So if you can show them how they're going to be more economically viable and more profitable by doing the things you want, you'll get farther. So if you can come up and talk about, because right now what you think is right, self-righteously, is not what they think is right. They're thinking they have a different set of values. Their values aren't wrong. They just have a different set of values. Yours are not right. You have a different set of values. So if you don't communicate what you value in terms of what they value, they don't listen. They're not engaged. But if you can translate what you're saying into their world where they can see the economics of it. So he went and did research for about 6 months and actually found a link between how they could actually come out more economically viable by doing new technologies and new things that would help the environment. And he closed a big deal with one of the countries and made it happen. It's in motion. But the point is, it's about caring enough about another individual to not project your values onto them and expect them to live in your values, which is futile, but to care enough to know that they have a different set of values. How do I see how what they're dedicated to is serving me, and how do I see what I'm dedicated to is serving them, and make a link so there's a dialogue, and you can communicate in a way where they can see the benefits of it. And the moment you do, the labels of those idiotic politicians or whatever change. They just have a different set of values, and you're not talking in their values. The moment he communicated economically in their values, they're all open. Because now they're realizing that this is an economic move for economic development in the country, and that's what gives them points. The idealism of a clean environment is not what's giving them points as much as making sure that people have jobs, people are able to pay bills, and there's taxes, This is what's running the thing. So when he did that, he got somewhere. And now he's now researching in advance with respect the next country and finding out what is their needs, their values, asking questions, not making them wrong, not making them an idiot, and finding out what their needs are and not approaching them until they have a legitimate strategy to help them economically by doing things that will be helpful to the country and to the environment. He said to me, he says that one idea about communicating in values has shifted the whole thing. And that's because we want to be right instead of want to learn how to love and appreciate and communicate. And that makes a difference. So that's why I try to teach people to find out, just like your father, find out what his values are, what's important to him, and then communicate that, and he opens up. But people usually that are demonstrated, that we label negative, are usually holding on to a fantasy about how life is, and life's not matching it, so they're angry. and they're upset and they're critical of that. But if you know what their values are, you can communicate their values, and then they open up. I've seen it over and over again. I've mediated conflicts on many, many occasions in many parts of the world that it's totally doable, but we can't do it from both being right. You have to do it from humbling ourselves and learning how what they have is a service to us and what we have is a service to them. And then we have dialogue. Otherwise, we just have debate. Debate just gets you nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's a rhetorical persuasion of righteousness onto the other person instead of a dialogue where you're both learning from each other.
Given the knowledge that, and I'm going to say that we acquire, people in our industry, you and I, have you ever been approached for a senior leadership role within government to work in this space? Would you ever do it if you were?
I don't have a desire necessarily to do that. That's not my dream to be a government official. I have visioned myself being behind the scenes, and that I've been able to do. I've spoken in various countries to people in the government. I just got asked to speak at the United Nations for 2026 to bring my methodology and communication technologies to that. What will happen, I don't know, but I'm going to prepare for that and get that. I spoke at UNESCO before. I've spoken in Iran. I've spoken in China. I've spoken in many places and met with people, even in Australia also. But I haven't had a desire to be a politician. I don't think I would ever do well as a politician because I'm more reasonable down the center than I am polarized to one side.
It's funny, I interviewed a lady by the name of Senator Pauline Hansen, who will easily go down in history as one of the most controversial politicians in Australia. And I suppose if you had to compare her policies, they'd probably be most inclined to be Donald Trump's policies. Immigration, that type of thing. She was a single mother of 3 kids, I think, and then was a fish and chip shop owner who could see the trajectory of the country. And she's the first politician that I've interviewed. I got invited into her office, and she's only ever been on 60 Minutes or, the mainstream media. No one's ever really sat down with her. I wanted to humanize her because I never used to like her, John. But as I evolved and healed, got my life sorted, I started to understand and have more empathy for what she was trying to do. So I was curious to spend some time with her, and we got on really good, really good. We had a bit of fun actually. I was sitting in her chair at the end of it, and I said, "Oh, Pauline, would you cancel my 3 o'clock and get me a cappuccino?" I get ready to film and stuff. But I had a conversation for about 20 minutes afterwards, asking her whether she thought I had what it took to be a politician. And she shared a number of things with me, and I immediately got that sense, kind of like you, John. I was like, this isn't for me. Like my book, which is a memoir, self-help book, details all of the badness that I've done, as well as, some of the improvements I've made. So I'm not worried about being outed as a fraud because it's all there. But I was just like, it seems like an incredibly toxic environment because of the levels of polarity that are involved. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't want to say that it's in all cases that way, because there's gradations of political, awareness. You have right now in America, up until about the last 10 days or so, there's been a lot of polarity, incredible amount of polarity. Throughout the world since COVID, I think there's been a very heightened degree of polarity. But then there's also periods in history where those are a little bit more calmed down and people are a little bit more reasonable and rational. When the amygdala is run wild and we're in survival mode in our culture, then we are in the amygdala, which is very polarized. Avoid pain, seek pleasure, be right. The amygdala wants a fantasy and wants to be right, and wants to avoid a nightmare, wants to avoid shame. So we put on an imposter syndrome, and then we end up projecting that onto other people, and we get clashes. And this is what most politics are, polarities. These are the bad guys on the good guys. It's an in-group, out-group bias. And it's a subjective confirmation and disconfirmation bias awareness that people are in. That is the opposite of what I teach. But it's an amygdala stage of development in the brain. And moralists who are in, absolutist and, naturalist or whatever, they're down in that same mode. They're polarized. And so that means that they're blind to the other side. So like I went for fun as an experiment, 12, 15 years ago, I'm not sure, maybe more. I went to a political fundraising event in Houston, Texas for Republican fundraising. And you pay $10,000 to get into this thing, and it's a social evening event, right? And drinks and cocktails and social. Across the street the following night, I paid $10,000 to go a Democratic one. And I was doing it not because I'm Republican or Democrat. I'm not into that kind of stuff. I just was curious about human behavior. And the people on this side were the good group and the in group, and over there were the bad group. And they're all the evils about that group across the street, they were condemning and praising this. So that's the amygdala. It wants pride and fantasy. Of course, the people on this side the following night, it was hilarious. I mean, I wish I could have recorded both of them. I didn't have Apple phones then. Record both of them and then played it to both, because it would have been it would have been a good show. But then these people made it, we're all good, and they could only see their good sides. They couldn't see any of their own downsides. Across the street, they were seeing the downsides, and vice versa. Both sides were true. And notice the things that they were saying that was positive, and the things these people were saying that were negative were true on this side, and also true on that side. I could see both sides. I could see the pros, the cons, the ups, the downs, the positive, negatives of both sides. It wasn't attached, and saw that that's inevitable in human behavior. You're not going to get rid of any of those things. Those are part of human behavior. But they were very subjectively biased, very black and white, and very much staunch. And so if I had to be a politician on that, I'd have to be very amygdala driven and very survival oriented and very righteous. And it just doesn't, I find I have moments like that, but I just couldn't live that way. That would not be, everything I've been studying and researching for 52 years doesn't point to that. That's not the solution for humanity.
Yeah, if I knew that I had all the powers that I was elected to do and not be controlled by external interests, which, as we've come to learn, effectively the president and the governors, and they're all really puppets to the best of my knowledge. They might have some influence, but there's much, much larger powers that are influencing outcomes.
The
and all
people
kinds
with the money, yes. The people with the money.
Correct.
There's no equal representation. That's sort of an idealist idea that, the poor have the same representation as the rich. But the real truth is that people that have more power and influence are going to have more influence. That's simple.
Yeah.
So it's the way it works.
If you got a call from Donald Trump and whoever Kamala Harris, just using them because it's pivotal, in the current topic, and they said, John, what do you recommend? What do you recommend I do to help create harmony between the country? Like, do you have anything a book that you recommend?
Well, I don't pursue peace because can I share a little journey? I was speaking I've spoken at 3 peace conferences, okay, and I'm about to do another one, and I tell a story there that makes everybody just jaw drop, and I tell them, I said, how many of you? Now imagine a whole audience dedicated at a peace conference. And I say, how many of you, put your hand up, how many of you have moments of inner calm and inner peace? Of course, they all proudly put their hand up, look around. Yes, that's why I'm at a peace conference, right? That's their pride. And I said, great. I said, now, how many of you have moments of inner turmoil and conflict inside, within yourself? And everybody looks around and they're afraid to put their hand up. They're looking around to see if it's okay to put their hand up. And finally, I say, I certainly have moments of inner conflict and inner turmoil. I don't have total peace 24 hours a day. I have both. And when I put my hand up, they all started laughing, which is a comedy covering up a tragedy of a fantasy and a moral hypocrisy that they're striving for. It's not obtainable. And then they put their hands up and everybody then starts laughing. And they go, oh, okay, I certainly do. And I make them acknowledge that they have times of calm and times of turmoil. And they all admit it. Okay, we all there now? Good. Now let's go to the level 2 dynamic. now you find your soulmate, you find your spouse, you finally get the man or woman that you're looking for, and you finally have total peace. And they all laugh. They go, hell no. I said, but how many would agree that you have times of calm and times of turmoil, and times of getting along and times when you have differences, similars and differences, and peace and war? And they all put their hands up eventually. I said, now, when you're in peace and you kind of go humpy-pumpy and you make a child, right? Then all of a sudden you have a child now. How many of you finally get total peace? And of course they start laughing and go, God, no. And says there's times of peace and times of turmoil, times of calm, times of challenge. And they go, yes. I said, now when you get with your family, with your brothers or sisters' family at a family reunion, how many would agree that it's total peace? And no, the family's got complementary opposite antiparticle people inside the family, pairs of opposites. And so you think, well, they're my brother and sister's completely bonkers the way they raise their kids and stuff. But now there's calm and there's turmoil. I said, now you go to work and there's calm and turmoil. And there's now at a home association meeting, there's calm and turmoil. At what point does world peace come about? Mm-hmm. When not one individual, not one family, not one extended family, not one business is one without the other. And I said, we need both support and challenge to innovate and grow and to not stagnate in our system. And I tried to explain to them, you need both. So if you were to say, well, then both are embraced, and you now have the harmony of seeing the pain and pleasure and the pairs of opposites, the unity of opposites displayed and honored, then I think that may be attainable by an individual at moments. But to say that you're going to have total harmony without disharmony or kind without cruel or whatever is partly a delusion. So I don't even promote idealisms like that because they're not real. There's no evidence of that any time in history or prehistory. But if I had Camilla and Donald and they came to me and said, what do we do? I would have them go through my method and have them do the method on each other and own all the mistakes that the other one does. And it would be an interesting adventure, and calm them all down and get them into their executive center so we have some leadership, true leadership, but not just polarizations.
I've got the Nobel Prize Committee on hold, John, and I'm going to pull the trigger once you make that happen. You will give it.
I had a lovely lady. I was asked to mediate a conflict between Israeli leaders and Palestinian leaders in South Africa. And
recently?
So there were 5. Pardon me?
Recently? Was this a recent thing?
This is right before COVID. And so this is about 4.5 years ago. And so I had 5 people from Israel and 3 people from Palestine in the same room, across the table from each other, literally on 2 sides of a table. I'm at the head of the table. And just as I'm about to start the meeting, a lady from Israel puts her hand up and she says, Dr. Demartini, do you believe in absolute evil? I said, nope. And she says, well, I do. I said, do you think that has something to do with why you've been trying to negotiate and mediate a peace resolution for 14 years and had got nowhere? And she said, that's a point. I said, what do you define to be absolute evil? And she said, unwilling to change, arrogance, and, defiance and things like that. She started listing them. And I said, all right, let's write down what you think is absolute evil. And, self-righteous, arrogance, pride, unwillingness to change, and defiance of what we want. Okay, I said, great. Now, go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating that behavior. And she said, I pride myself on never being that way. I am always open and kind and things like that. And I said, except in this moment right now when you're judging, you're not seeing the obvious. Anyway, so she was dissociated from her own shame and her own thing. So I said, well, I certainly have moments when I'm arrogant and self-righteous and acting like the way you do. So I guess I have absolute evil in your ideas. And I started to open up and I said, let's take a look and see where you've been arrogant and demanding and everything else. And I made her go through, and we found 39 examples in 2 hours of where she had done everything she condemned this guy for. Now, the guy she's condemning and talking about is in the room. Now, I said, now can you see that you've done that same behavior? Pardon for this disturbance, another big wave.
Wow.
Yeah, we're in pretty good sized waves today. But so what's interesting is I made her go and own it until she humbled herself. And I said, are you now certain that you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating what you've been judging in him? Because the only thing you're judging in him is things you've been feeling ashamed about that he's reminding you. And the reason why you're trying to condemn it is because you're trying to stamp it out in your own life. That's why you say, I never do that. I pride myself in the other way. That's a normal dissociation from your own shame. And I pointed it out to her, and she owned it. And she was quiet, and she actually got a tear in the eye. I said, now, go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual that you've condemned, that you think is this evil individual, displaying this behavior. She goes, yeah, there. Good. How did it benefit you? It doesn't. I said, you gave me an answer in less than a half a second, which means you didn't even try to look. Try looking. How did it benefit you in your life? It says, I can't see how it benefits. I said, go look again. How could it benefit you? And finally, I said, when did you start becoming politically activated? And when did you start writing your book? Well, when that individual came along and I started to be really upset. So that means that you became known, you wrote a book, became popular, you've met famous people, you've got funds going your way, you've traveled the world, you've met amazing people because of this person's behavior.
Well,
she looked at me and she goes, I never thought of it that way. I said, so if you had not met him and he'd not been in your life, where would you be today? What would you have been doing? Well, I was a mother raising some children, and I was not doing really much with my life. I said, so is his behavior, this so-called absolute evil, catalyzed inside you and awakened a leader in you, and now an influential person that's inspired and exemplified great things for people? She goes, yes. Did you ever thank him for that? Did you give him a cut out of all the income you've made? She goes, no. And I made her go through there, and we came up with 43 benefits. 43 benefits over the next hour and a half. And now there was the translator there and a mediator there that's been working with her for 14 years. And she's just smiling and going, man, this is amazing watching her be in the hot seat. Because I didn't talk to anybody. This is just this dialogue going on between her and mine. And I said, what's another benefit? I didn't stop until she had tears in her eyes. Her career came out of it. The influence came out of it. And then I turned on her and I said, are you dedicated to actually solving this problem? Are you dedicated to getting famous? And letting people who are angry, appeasing them so you got power, and appeasing people that are angry instead of actually mediating things? Because I'm questioning whether or not you're really committed to mediating a conflict here, or whether or not you're just having power and influence over the people that are upset, that are by it. And she got humbled by it, and she looked at it. Now, the whole time, the guy on the other side is having to go through and reflect on this, because this is all about him. And he's now looking at her and thinking, this is the same thing that I'm doing with her. I'm thinking she's the one that's evil, and she's the one. And so everybody in the room is going through and doing inventories and doing this exercise as we're doing this, on their own. Well, I'm addressing her and holding her in the hot seat. When I got through and she found all the benefits, she had tears coming out of her eyes and just sat there and put her head down on the table. And she goes, I've never seen what I've just seen by these questions. I said, the labels we put on people are a result of incomplete awareness and not willing to see both sides of people and not seeing both sides of actions, because there's always two sides to it. There's not an evil or a good, or whether just your bias is what's making it that. As Milton says, you make a heaven out of a hell, and thinking makes it so, and vice versa. we took a break at that point because there was no break for about 4 hours. And we took a break. She went and redid her makeup because she cried, lost her makeup a bit. The man came up to me and he said to me, he said, Dr. Demartini, that was something I've never seen in a mediation. We never even had to talk. And you just talked to that one lady, and I swear to God, you were talking to me the whole time. And I said, I could swear she was referring to me. I said, she was referring to you. That's how she saw you, but she doesn't see you that way now. And you probably saw her something like that. And you both wanted to be right instead of wanting to learn how to communicate, appreciate, and see both sides of life. He said, I'm not angry at her right now. And I'm not even offended by her right now. I don't think she's with you. She came back in the room, and before that lady came back in the room, the mediator came up to me and she says, I've spent 14 years and watching a pointless endeavor to try to get the opposing side to come onto your side instead of actually finding out that that was a reflection. What you did in 4 hours is more than we've accomplished in 14 years.
Wow.
Because you hold her accountable. Now, by the time we're done, they were not angry at each other. They saw each other from a different perspective and they were communicating. Now, here's the thing. Next time I came to South Africa, that lady has a big influence in Israel. She had a radio show in South Africa. She was there again. And she asked me to come on the radio show. And she humbled herself in front of millions of Israeli followers. I mean, millions. And said that my own judgment was blocking my own ability to mediate a conflict resolution. And she humbled herself and spoke in the hopes of actually making the difference instead of just being, getting power and influence off people that are angry and taking a side and defending it, which is what we see in politics. All that focus on the trivia instead of actually on the thing that's really a meaningful pursuit. So I'm a firm believer in asking quality questions that most people are afraid to ask because they have to face the side of themselves that they may not want to face. Because we're under this idea, this moral hypocrisy: be kind, don't be cruel, be nice, don't be mean, be positive, don't be negative, instead of be yourself. And you're a human being and you have it all. And you're not here to get rid of half of yourself. That's a social fantasy. And then when people don't live up to it, then we're angry at people. And we're angry at ourselves. And to me, that's the lowest level of moral development, lowest level of, conscious awareness. It's an amygdala in full force of survival instead of an executive function where we're able to see things objectively and see both sides and have a more open view. A dialectic where you're both learning from each other instead of a rhetoric and debate where you're both trying to be right. And that's what we see in politics sometimes, and conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
Density instead of awareness. So my job is to educate people. I don't want to be the politician. I'd rather just be the advisor behind the scenes.
Well, you're doing a hell of a job, John. That was just mind-blowing. Thank you, by the way. How do people find this? Do they have to read the book, or is there a separate thing on your website they can find to do this exercise?
Well, the method that I've developed over the last 52 years, I just call the Demartini Method, but it is a series of questions that help you become conscious of things you overlooked that you were unconscious of, and allows you to see both sides so you are able to think before you react. Most people react before they think and then come up with a BS answer why they did what they did, instead of actually think before they react and actually care enough about another human being to reflect and see that they represent a part of ourselves, and then honor that and learn to love. And that's totally doable. I mean, I've seen people that they're really, really in a dense mode. We're all in a dense mode at times, when we're in a survival mode. But I've really seen people that have really been through amazing things, challenges, and, all kinds of traumas and stuff. There's nothing that your mortal body can experience that your authentic or immortal soul can't love.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing. And I've seen almost every imaginable thing that people could go through. I mean, explosions and bombing and rapes and you name it. There's nothing that can happen in your life that you can't turn into an opportunity and use to contribute to this world. And if you run the story about how terrible it is, you're not going to. You're just going to be a victim of history instead of a master of destiny. But if you see it on the way and how you can use it, which is what our brain is designed to do with hedonic adaptation, and become resilient, adaptable. You exemplify what's possible and you lead the way of how to perceive life to your advantage and to show people how to be resourceful. And, that's what I'm more interested in doing. And so the method is a series of questions that hold you accountable to end up with a result where you're basically saying, thank you, I love you, to yourself and to the people around you for things you never imagined you could do that for. And liberating yourself from all the intrusive thoughts that all your infatuations and fantasies and nightmares and resentments that occupy space and time in your mind and run you and distract you and age you and cause, health issues. All of that subsides. So yeah, that you can go on my website and you can get access to that and the questions. But I teach it at the breakthroughs. I introduce people to it at the breakthrough experience. That's why I've been doing that so many years. I've done it 1,215 times.
Wow. These are all the dates are available on the website as well. And if you've been living under a rock, folks, Dr. John Demartini has a prolific resume. And I didn't want to bore him with running through it today like every other podcaster might do. Yet you can figure out and be energetically drawn to the work he's doing. Dr. John, do you have any concluding thoughts for our amazing audience today?
Well, since the topic we kind of dabble with, the magnificence of who you are is far greater than any fantasies you'll impose on yourself. And we commonly impose fantasies on ourselves because we compare ourselves to others. And we put people on pedestals and minimize ourselves, or put people in pits and exaggerate ourselves. But the minimized and exaggerated selves are our imposters. And our imposters, our parts, are never as powerful as our whole. So give yourself permission to shine, not shrink. Don't compare yourself to others. Compare your own daily actions to what's really most meaningful, priority, and most inspiring and purposeful to you. And exemplify what's possible by living by priority, dedicating to what's most important, delegating what's least important, giving other people the opportunity to do what they love to do through delegation, helping the economy, serving people, and having fulfillment so you don't have to fulfill your life with overeating or drinking or partying and debaucherous behavior. I always say pursuing economics and life with meaning leads to philanthropy, but if not, it leads to debauchery. And so give yourself permission to shine, not shrinking. And the magnificence of what you're really committed to is worth the pursuit. And even if somebody doesn't understand it, to be great is to be misunderstood. Just know that's, if you're being ridiculed or violently opposed or whatever, it may be a sign that you're on track, because you just may be doing something original and something that's contributive to the world. And traditions and conventions that are stagnant need to be broken, and it may be up to you to be able to make a difference there.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. John Demartini.